The Dyatlov Pass incident. I can still hear the wind howling through the pass, its icy fingers clawing at my face as we trudged through the snow. There were 9 of us, a close-knit group of experienced hikers. We had conquered mountains before, but this expedition, Dyatlov Pass, felt different from the start. It began with small things, strange animal tracks in the snow that none of us could identify, the unnerving silence when the wind died down, and that unshakable feeling of being watched. Igor, our leader, kept reassuring us that everything was fine, but his forced smile didn't fool me. On the night it happened, we had pitched our tent on the slope of Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of the dead. The name itself was unsettling, but we laughed it off. We cooked a modest meal, told stories, and settled into our sleeping bags. The wind outside was fierce, and the tent flapped violently, but we were used to this. We were safe, or so we thought. I awoke to chaos. A deafening roar shook the ground, and the tent was suddenly filled with panicked shouting. "Something's out there!" Zina cried, her voice trembling. I fumbled for my flashlight, but the tent's fabric was slashed open before I could grab it. We spilled out into the freezing night, half-dressed, blinded by snow and darkness. I saw Igor shouting, waving for us to follow him down the slope. We ran, feet sinking into the snow, our breath ragged. Behind us, I swear I heard a low, guttural sound, something not human. I didn't dare look back. We found temporary refuge near the tree line. Our group huddled together, shivering, our teeth chattering too hard to speak. But then we realized Nikolai and Ludmila were missing. Igor wanted to go back, but Yuri held him back. "No one goes alone," he said, his voice shaking. Hours passed, though it felt like days. One by one, we succumbed to the cold. I can still see Ludmila's face, frozen in a scream, as we discovered her later. And Nikolai, his body twisted in a way that defied explanation. I don't remember much after that, just flashes, the searing pain in my chest as the cold claimed me, the blinding white light that seemed to pierce the storm, and that sound, low, guttural, unrelenting. When they found us, we were scattered across the pass. The investigators would write off the injuries as natural causes or unknown forces. But I was there. I know we weren't alone. Something hunted us that night on the Mountain of the Dead, and its secrets are buried with us in the snow. If you ever find yourself in Dyatlov Pass, remember this: no matter what you hear, don't look back. And pray you never hear that sound. The M Cave disappearance. I've always loved the solitude of the desert. The Mojave isn't just sand and rocks, it's alive in its own way. The wind whispers through the canyons, the stars burn brighter than you'd ever imagine, and every so often, you find something that makes you feel like you've stepped into another world. That's what drew me back out here, the M Cave. The first time I stumbled across it, I was just wandering, following a ridge line, when I saw it, perfectly shaped like an M, carved into the rock as though it didn't belong. The air around it was heavier, like stepping into a pressure chamber. My gut twisted with this primal urge to turn back. I laughed it off at the time. A hiker spooked by a cave. Ridiculous. But I didn't go in. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I told people online about the cave, expecting someone to say, "Oh yeah, I know that place." But no one did. Instead, I got warnings, theories, and one comment that stuck with me: some doors are better left closed. I had to see it again. The desert is unforgiving. You can lose yourself in the vastness, and that's part of what I love about it. But this trip felt different. Even the light seemed wrong, muted somehow, as if the sun didn't dare shine too brightly here. I followed the same ridge line for hours, retracing my steps, until I found it. The M Cave. It was just as I remembered, deep and shadowed, the kind of black that swallows flashlight beams whole. This time, I went in. The air grew colder as I descended. The walls seemed to press in, like the cave was alive and watching me. My breath echoed unnaturally, as though something else was breathing with me. About 50 feet in, my flashlight flickered, casting warped shadows on the jagged walls. And then I heard it. A low hum, like the vibration of a giant tuning fork. It wasn't loud, but it filled the space, reverberating through my chest and down to my bones. My hands shook, and I nearly dropped the flashlight. I told myself it was wind or the rock shifting. But deep down, I knew better. The hum grew louder as I ventured deeper, pulling me forward like a magnet. I should have turned back, but curiosity kept me moving. The tunnel opened into a chamber. The walls glistened, as if wet, though the air was bone dry. In the center was a pile of rocks, arranged unnaturally, like a cairn. That's when I saw it. A figure, pale and thin, crouched at the edge of the chamber. Its eyes, if you could call them that, reflected my flashlight like an animal's. But this wasn't an animal. It unfolded itself slowly, unnaturally, rising to its full height. It had no face, just smooth, featureless skin stretched taut over its skull. The hum was deafening now, drowning out my thoughts. The thing took a step toward me, and my instinct screamed to run. I turned and sprinted back toward the entrance, the hum chasing me like a living thing. The light at the cave's mouth was ahead, but it felt like I wasn't getting closer. The tunnel stretched on endlessly. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. Finally, I burst into the sunlight, collapsing onto the rocky ground. When I looked back, the cave was gone. I don't mean I couldn't find it, I mean it wasn't there. Just solid rock where the entrance had been. I never went back to the Mojave after that. I don't tell people this story anymore, they wouldn't believe me anyway. But if you're ever hiking in the desert and find a cave shaped like an M, do yourself a favor. Turn around. Some doors are better left closed. The Boy Scout encounter. We were deep in the Appalachians, far away from anything resembling civilization. I was 13, and this was supposed to be the ultimate camping trip, just us Boy Scouts, our scout leader Mr. Harper, and a vast wilderness. For most of us, it was the first time we'd been this far from home. The first night was uneventful. We set up camp in a small clearing, built a fire, and told stupid ghost stories. Typical stuff. But by the second night, things started to feel off. It began with a faint rustling in the trees. At first, we thought it was just the wind or maybe an animal. Deer were common around here. But it wasn't like any animal I'd ever heard. The sound wasn't skittish, it was deliberate, like someone was pacing just out of sight. Probably just raccoons, Mr. Harper said, trying to reassure us. Get some sleep. Big hike tomorrow. We reluctantly climbed into our tents. But I couldn't sleep. The forest seemed too quiet now, except for the occasional crunch of leaves. I must have drifted off at some point, though, because I woke up to the most chilling sound, a scream. It was Danny, the youngest kid in the troop. He was standing outside his tent, pointing toward the trees. There was a man, he stammered. He was watching us. We scrambled out of our sleeping bags, flashlights slicing through the darkness. But the beam caught nothing but trees. Mr. Harper tried to calm us down, saying Danny must have been dreaming. But even he looked shaken. He grabbed his flashlight and did a quick perimeter check, muttering something about keeping his axe nearby. The rest of the night was tense. None of us got much sleep, and every little sound set my heart racing. The next morning, things got worse. As we packed up camp, we noticed footprints around the site, fresh ones. They circled the tents and led off into the woods. And some of our gear was missing, knives, rope, a couple of flashlights. Mr. Harper decided we were done. We packed up and started heading back to the trailhead, cutting the trip short. On the way, he radioed the ranger station to report what had happened. When we reached the station, the rangers didn't seem surprised. Apparently, they'd had reports of someone living out in the forest, stealing supplies from campsites. They'd found a makeshift shelter once, filled with stolen gear and other things. They didn't elaborate on what those other things were, but the look on their faces told us enough. The person was never caught. Even now, decades later, I can't shake the memory of Danny's scream, the footprints, and the feeling that someone was out there, watching us. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if Danny hadn't woken up when he did. What if we hadn't scared him off? Some nights, when I close my eyes, I still see the shadowy figure at the edge of the trees, silently waiting.